Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live. It is Thursday, the 11th. I am joined today by a podcaster who is misidentified by name more often than not. Andrew from Hey, Isn't That Devon Graham? Hey, Andrew, how are you tonight?
What's going on, Lauren? I'm doing all right, all right, all right.
Yeah, all right, all right, all right. That sounds like a Matthew McConaughey intro to me.
I like to think of it more as a Vilmer reference from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation.
So that's become something that people do now. That for a long time, that film was just not acknowledged. It wasn't even talked about with pure hatred. It just was like kind of blocked from a lot of people's memory, it seemed. But it is now, I mean, received special edition releases, and it's really gained in its popularity.
I noticed when it was announced from Scream Factory, there was a sea of comments complaining about it, saying that they were wasting time putting energy into it, no, which was really ridiculous because it was such a great release. It's my third favorite in the franchise, actually.
Well, we share a bit of a kind of controversial opinions about that franchise as far as the chapters that we adore.
Hmm.
We'll probably get to that in a little bit. I don't want to get the horse before the carriage here, but it was inevitable we went there anyway. So, one thing I would like to start with all guests on the show is just how did you originally get into horror? What was those early memories?
It was my mother when I was 5. Uh, I was intrigued by Child's Play. She showed me Child's Play, and it terrified me. I have vivid memories of nightmares about Chucky, but I was also really fascinated. I didn't want to not watch it, and I quickly bought. I remember I had my mom's special order Child's Play 2 on VHS from Video Central. This is probably like 1994, 95, and it was one of the most exciting mail days I've ever had. I watched the hell out of that tape. I love it.
So was a lot of people of a certain generation's introduction to the genre because I think for a lot of us it was hard to get to the theater to get a parent or guardian to agree to buy us the ticket when we were underage. But VHS was a different world. Maybe it was just because it was on a television set, but there seemed to be more of a permissive attitude from a generation of parents towards it. Was that your situation?
I mean, honestly, dude, my mom never restricted anything of me. I certainly didn't enact anything I shouldn't have been. She was always pretty fair and open to letting me watch what I wanted. I mean, I grew up watching horror movies, the Attitude Era of WWF, and Scarface and Carlito's Way, The Godfather. I mean, that's the stuff I watched when I was younger. So, yeah.
So obviously, it goes without saying that your parents were pretty much not of the opinion that screen violence would cause real violence or would give you emotional scars that you'd work out as delinquency as a child.
Not with me. I mean, my brother and sister were both over 10 years older than me, so they'd already probably gone through that and realized it was dumb, so I didn't get any of that, no.
I'm the younger child too, but my sister was she was a good person. She is a good person. So unfortunately, I didn't get any way of the road paved for me because, of course, I broke all the rules that she never thought about. So, but in my house, it was a situation whereas if I wanted to rent something like a Halloween film, there was no problem. But there was films that were off limits. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Dawn of the Dead, any of the Italian zombie films. Was there limits, or was it just an open playing field?
I don't ever recall being restricted of anything, but I also don't remember having like insane requests, if you will. I just watched. I mean, I was just because of what I was surrounded by with my mom and her sister. A lot of the stuff I watched was mostly mainstream when I was a kid. Halloween's, Friday 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, what have you. A few things were sprinkled in there. Things I saw at Blockbuster, like Dolly Dearest and Pinocchio's Revenge, Jack Frost, what have you. But I don't think I ever wanted anything that was just ridiculous that I can recall. So I didn't have that experience now.
I think the funniest thing, perhaps, for that generation is because parents then, just like today, were not overly familiar with the genre, but there was no internet for them to just, Google and answer either. So, Last House on the Left was okay because the cover art didn't look that vile compared to something like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But if you put those films side by side, there's one that a child probably definitely shouldn't see, and the other one's probably not as big a deal. And that was not the conclusions they came to. Of course, they didn't watch the films with me either.
Right. Yeah, I did watch Last House on the Left when I was younger. I don't. I mean, I watched a lot of these movies by myself, so they certainly didn't know. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was definitely one they supported me watching because they'd all seen it, so I think they knew that it wasn't like. I guess in their eyes, they didn't feel that it was something I couldn't handle, and it wasn't. I mean, I love the movie. I think it's the best horror movie ever made, and I think a lot of its intensity comes from the performances and the cinematography and stuff. But it's not like there's anything reprehensible compared to what's in Last House on the Left, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But again, it's a weird thing because there was a time period where there was no resources for parents besides
Right.
the MPAA rating, which we
Right.
all know is a horrifically flawed system. So you discover the genre mostly through VHS, I take it. I'm not. That's a simplification, I'm sure. But what role has the genre really played in your life going forward from childhood to now?
Well, it's always been a consistent place where I feel like what I'm trying to say here is it's always been a place where I felt like I could truly be not judged. I mean, I have mixed feelings about that these days, and we kind of talked about that briefly before we went on. Just the way culture is now and the way they kind of react to things from years ago. But I've always felt very like I could just be myself around horror because I always felt like you have to have quite an open mind to like the genre. You got to be open to things and understand that this is just a movie, and it doesn't. You watching this movie does not indicate that you're a certain type of person anyway. Because there's a lot of places I've been in my life with music and other hobbies that I've been disappointed in communities and such with them, but with horror I've always met great people who I can just really kind of be myself with. So it's been a positive thing in my life, I would say, most of the time.
So you came up also with punk rock and hardcore, correct?
Right.
So I always feel that there's an umbilicus that runs between horror and that scene in particular. Yes, late '80s there was a metal influence because of the MTV thing, but it seems like on a primal level there's a connection between what punk rock did for music, which was strip it down all the artifice that had built up between the '60s and '70s and return it to kind of a primal, pure state in the '50s. And horror goes through that exact process almost every 5 years. Whereas there's always some, brutal, honest version just around the corner.
Right.
So, would you consider the two scenes to be linked for yourself, or?
I can't really say I've had a lot of times where they've crossed paths for me. I mean, I've certainly met people who share both passions, but just in my time around, the hardcore scene, I don't remember horror really having any place in there. Not in a strong way, just individuals here and there. I haven't had that experience myself, no.
Because I have a few years on you. And when you talked about Dolly Dearest as being like a formative title, to me that was like, oh, that was when I was like already managing a store in a mall.
Right.
So there's a few years between us. I can remember in the earlier days when I discovered punk rock. It was through things like the Return of the Living Dead soundtrack, the band The Damned, there was plenty of imagery borrowed. Even the UK television series, The Young Ones, had an episode about the video nasties. And that show, despite the fact that it had a hippie character and a jocular character, it was definitely a punk rock show. It was definitely reflecting that time period. So you mentioned positivity. Kind of indirectly, but I'm going to lead you there. Your channel, Hey, Isn't That Devon Graham, has this overwhelming positivity towards the genre. And I find it very forgiving, more forgiving than I am. I mean, I'm kind of infamous for being the guy who will throw cold water on something if I really don't like it, but that's just me being honest. But I don't think you're being dishonest. I just think that you have a real passion for a lot of the genre. So what came with that decision to was it a decision to make the channel more positive than negative, or?
No, I mean, honestly, I would say I didn't. It wasn't a conscious choice. Like I'm going to specifically stay away from it, but rather that there were people who I did watch that did a lot of that, where they would do reviews and they were just like overwhelmingly nitpicky and just nasty and would call these movies unwatchable, and I just didn't like that. It started turning me off from their channels. So I certainly don't like doing it. And I know that this isn't a popular opinion, but this is just me being honest in regards to the question. There was a review I did with my friend Colton Heartbreaker. I told him I would do a collaborative review with him on the movie The Town That Dreaded Sundown, and I'd never seen it. So I watched it, and I didn't really like it. I didn't hate it, but I just didn't really like it, and I kind of felt really uncomfortable doing the review. I didn't say anything negative. I just said, yeah, it's a pretty good movie in this regard, in this regard, in this regard, but I don't really have much else to say, because I didn't want to say that I was like unhappy or bored or anything. I just didn't see the point. Like, I talked to Christian about this a lot. It just seems like, why would you want to waste your time going out of your way to talk badly about something? It just seems like, why would you want to put energy into that? Obviously there's different circumstances. If you're somebody who your channel is about reviewing new movies that come out and you want to cover things, or maybe you do have something to say you feel strong about, sure. But the only thing I've done kind of in the reverse is when I reviewed The Grudge. I made a video kind of expressing how I was, really misled from the things I'd heard about it, and I just thought that people should give it a chance because I really enjoyed it.
And I support your right to be wrong. No, listen. The Grudge was a horrible movie-going experience for me, but it's a good example. It's a very good example of my take is that I'm asked a lot of my opinions on specific films, and that puts me in a position whereas I have to answer. And I won't lie, I like the idea that we can have differences of opinion. So when I have an unpopular opinion, rather than shrink away from it, I lean into it. And a lot of the times that'll be hey, the film's a Jim Cameron, how do you feel? And I'm like, well, if I never see another one, I'm good. If I never see any of them again, I'm good. Literally my favorite Jim Cameron film is Piranha 2: The Spawning. So it's just one of those things that I lean into that, not for the controversy or anything, but because I think too often people run from honest opinions. So this brings us back, because you love Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, or the return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, depending on when and how you saw the film. My first experience was with a VHS bootleg of the film when it was still called Return. I think the film is brave. I don't think it's completely successful. I don't think it's I think it's quite a bit shy of the original, obviously. But here's the thing. There's a groupthink out there that just immediately would jump to, oh, that film is trash. Oh, that film does things that I didn't want a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film to do. The Illuminati plot, the biplane at the end. And rather than see the biplane as an exaggerated criticism of the Black Maria truck at the end of the original, which is just as absurd, by the way. To have a truck come out of nowhere and save your heroine at the end of the film with no setup is just as, from a storytelling point of view, is just as absurd as a biplane dropping out of the air for no apparent reason. Right. But that's what that film was doing. That's what Return or Next Generation was doing. It was sort of parodying its own series, and
I
it was doing so.
Yes.
And I think it was doing it in a very intelligent way, but presenting itself as the opposite. It wanted to present itself in the lowest possible way. So I think it's a brave film, and I think it's misunderstood. And I've always defended it. Not my favorite in the series by a long shot. So we go ahead a few years, and Texas Chainsaw 3D is coming out. And to be honest with you, from the trailers, I thought, this is going to be a train wreck. This is going to be a disaster. But I went, because I go, Yeah. And I was shocked by the fact that it was too glossy. I'll say that. It's too smooth a film for what I consider Texas Chainsaw Massacre to be at its heart. But I loved it. I loved the film that they made. And there was this, again, groupthink in the horror community that, oh, we have to hate that movie. And it never quite sat well with me. that the community would all just rally around one opinion. I don't know. I don't mean that to be a soliloquy. What do you think?
Well, I've told this story a few times because I do share those feelings. It was about, I would say, 6 or 7 months ago that I finally watched Return to Sleepaway Camp. I'd always heard the worst things about it, and everyone made it sound like it was just... Like, when I interpret that something is unwatchable, to me that means it's boring, and I'm going to get bored watching, I'm going to want to turn it off. But I wanted to see it, and I got it for a good deal because it's out of print. So I ordered it, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And, I mean, compared to the previous 3, which I also love very much, as a lot of people know, it's my least favorite, but I really enjoyed it. I just thought it was really over the top and silly and campy. I loved everything about it. And I remember when I reviewed it, I think maybe I did a haul video and I talked about this. One of my viewers did a rewatch on it, and he did a review for it and said he actually enjoyed it more than he previously had, and me putting it over as much as I did made him want to give it another shot. In the comment section for his video were dozens upon dozens of people who would say, I don't know, man, I've just heard so many bad things I can't bring myself to watch it. And I thought that was ridiculous. Like, you're not even going to try it because people have said they don't like it? Like, really? Like, that's just... That movie really changed my perspective on a lot of things, because there's been so many movies that I've heard are reprehensible and just worthless, like The Hills Have Eyes 2, or the Prom Night remake, or Lords of Salem at one point was a movie that everyone said was bad, and I love Lords of Salem. It's my favorite Rob Zombie movie, and I thought The Hills Have Eyes 2 was enjoyable. It's not a shade of the original by any means, but it's not a bad movie in the sense of entertainment value. And I also don't stand that these are great movies by any means. I just enjoy them. Sometimes I enjoy movies that are silly and campy and stupid, if you want to be technical about it. But, I mean, I don't have a criteria that needs to be met for me to enjoy a movie other than it entertains me. That's it.
And I think you're the saner of the two, because I find myself constantly on a tightrope walk, because I will never subjugate my honesty. That's never going to happen. I'm always going to say what I think. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people think that I'm very analytical and dry. And the problem with that is that if you look behind me, there's a Friday the 13th poster, a Hellfest poster, a Jason X poster. Well, that doesn't fit that narrative, does it? I mean, I think all those films have something to say and are better than their reputations. Well, maybe the original Friday probably is its reputation. Mm-hmm. But because it has a very good reputation is what I mean that. But I think the problem for me is that when I watch a film, I'm very emotional with films. And I look for films that make me feel something. And when I get a film that has mood and atmosphere or matches a moment, and I just love living in that world, it wins me over. People ask me repeatedly, there's the very first message from a new subscriber on Letterboxd, follower on Letterboxd, I'm sorry. First comment was, I don't see what you see in Hellfest. It bored me. And my whole point is, I just wanted to live in that world. Don't even talk to me about the characters. I can defend all that, but don't even talk to me about the characters or the kills, the music, the wonderful Bear McCreary score. Don't even talk to me about any of that. I just wanted to live in that world. I love Halloween. I love haunted attractions. I love that time. And it was the first film that connected with me and made me feel exactly that. So does that give it a leg up for me? Hell yeah. But I don't think there's anyone watching this broadcast that doesn't love Halloween. So I tend to fight for films, whereas I think other people, if they got the groupthink out of their head, they could have a good experience with.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who unfortunately feel like they need to like something, or I think that's a kind of an immature way of thinking, to be honest. Just to think that you have to like a certain movie to, I don't know, fit in or feel like you fit in within yourself. I don't know. I mean, I've never been like that. I don't want to sound like cheesy or generic here. I'm just saying, like, I've never tried to be validated by other people. It's just not really something maybe I tried that once when I was, a kid, and I just quickly realized it wasn't really for me. So I just don't understand being so, like, concerned with what people think of you, I guess, with something that you enjoy. I don't know. It's just weird. Like, I mean, I'm respectable to everybody. I don't harm anybody in any way. I think I can enjoy what I enjoy, and if somebody thinks less of me for it, that's their problem, not mine.
And that is a very traditional punk rock view on things. Little side note to everyone out there who thinks punk rock is about some kind of liberal activism. Punk rock is not right, it's not left. It's about making up your own mind and living by the values you instill in yourself. It is about being true and honest to every one of your positions and about being fearless about those positions. End of the PSA.
Absolutely.
So let's jump gears a bit, because we're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We're talking about guilty pleasures, which I know you probably hate that phrase. I've explained it too many times what I mean by that, but let's talk about something we share very much in common, which is, I think, a sentiment that doesn't get expressed nearly enough. People are fixated on the 1980s. We talk about 1980s horror all the time. Those franchises, those icons. But you and I have discussed a number of times the fact that the decade before that was undoubtedly a better decade, the 1970s.
I can think of, now, maybe I haven't just seen enough, and that's fair, but off the top of my head, I can't think of enough movies I can count on one hand that I don't like from the 70s. Everything I've seen 70s horror is very high in my regard. Like, everything is so good from that era. They're all like the best horror films of all time for me. Like, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Exorcist, Jaws, phenomenal, obviously. But even other films like, I really love that movie, The Sentinel. I think that movie is wonderful. Alice, Sweet Alice is great. Of course, Halloween. Phantasm. I mean, I love. I want to use this term. I love when there's like the avant-garde kind of feel of the 70s. It's exclusive to that era in these movies, and it's never really been replicated. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's never been in any 80s horror movie, but it's just not it's niche if it's there at all. You know, maybe like I can watch The Shining and see vibes of it because it's 1980s. I don't know if it was filmed late 79 or not. Possibly was, but you know, early 80s movies, I can, like, even like Friday the 13th, I can see like a 70s kind of vibe a little bit, late 70s, you know, in there. And that's why I would hold that movie in high regard as far as 80s horror movies. But yeah, I think they're the best. And I just feel like back then in the 70s, they were just really like the equal to music from the 60s. Like, just this experimenting, this just going like all out, trying something and knocking it out of the park every time. Just brilliant people doing brilliant things with so little too. I just think that was a big thing that helped them create the things they did. You know, I love the circumstances of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of what they had to work with and how they utilized it. I love Daniel Pearl. Every now and then on Instagram, he'll kind of talk about different things he struggled with in the movie, the kind of lenses he had to work with, but how he made it work. I mean, you know, that's how I was when I was doing photography. Is I was not formally trained with it at all, so a lot of the stuff I was doing was DIY and trying to figure out how to make something work with what I had, and it just breathed creativity for me. And I think that's what they did in the 70s with those movies.
So I think there was a lot of things going on in the 70s that we lost in the 80s. And one of the big things is that Hollywood had not taken ownership of the genre. So you had independent productions in New York, in Connecticut, in New Jersey, in up and down the coast. You had Texas and the Midwest. And so you have all these really individuals, not even companies, not even production companies, just groups of friends getting together in the wake coming after Night of the Living Dead comes out. And they said, look, we can really do this. We can make a movie. It can go out there and play. Maybe it'll only play 6 drive-ins, but it'll play. And we'll make our money back, most likely. So you saw this, the doors just get kicked in. And you might watch a film like Don't Look in the Basement and say, wow, that's really rough. It's really crude. But I'll take crude over CGI slick any day of the week. The other thing I think that was going on is that you had this group of young filmmakers coming up, and they weren't competing with their peers. There was they weren't aware. There was no internet. They weren't aware of what was happening in Missouri if they were in, Tennessee. They just weren't aware. So they had to do it all themselves. They had to figure it out themselves, and they came at it with a different approach every time. So it's a genre it's a decade in the genre where you can have The Hills Have Eyes, and you can have Don't Look in the Basement, and you can have Jaws. And the studio involvement was there, but they were fighting with the little guys for the first time ever. The little guys were competing, so they were getting rougher and they were taking chances, and it was just a decade of all boats rising.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't mean that to bash the 80s, because there's a lot of, especially early 80s stuff that I really love. But I think the 70s built the entire foundation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's plenty of stuff I love from the 80s too, obviously. I have no issues with it whatsoever. Just by comparison, though, the 70s, I would be much happier if there was an abundance of 70s horror movies for me to enjoy. And I'm sure there's many, many, many I've yet to see that I'll soon find and love as well.
And what you just said is just so inspiring to me, because I'm unfortunately on the other side of this. It's like, unfortunately, I'm at the age and I've had the passions for so long that I've seen a lot. I'm not
Right.
gonna. No one's seen it all. No one has even seen most, but I've seen a lot. So my chances of finding that next classic that I've not come across up to now is rarer for these classic eras. And I'm very jealous whenever you get excited about a film that you're just coming to, or Christian is just coming to,
Hmm.
or one of the former Sausage Factory guys, because rather than look down at my nose at them, I'm like, I wish I could be there. If I could
Right.
erase parts of my brain and re-experience them for the first time, I would.
Oh yeah.
No question about it. And there'd be some real life events I'd erase too.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. So I promised Christian, because he reached out to me today, that I would go over a few subjects with you.
All right. I'm ready.
So do you have your armor up?
Sure.
Okay. So let's talk about streaming.
Oh yeah, streaming. Well, I mean, I've talked about this a lot with different people, and I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and make it sound like something like that I have a good fight here. I just love physical media and I don't want it to die. I know that it will, but I just don't want it to. And I mean, like I can make the argument all day about how a disc is superior to a stream. That's just common sense, really. But the thing is like I'm a collector too. Like besides the fact that I'm passionate about the things that I do buy and I do love them and cherish them and watch them and listen to them, I'm a collector, and I just don't like the idea of a movie that I love existing only digitally, because it doesn't feel like I own it. It doesn't feel like it's something I have in my collection. Even if I buy it digitally, it doesn't feel that way, and I don't like that. And I've told Christian, we've talked about this. I have no issue at the idea of them coexisting. I just don't really think that that's possible, because I think that it's just taking over. And it's weird because I feel like it's regressive. Because I mean, I remember in when I was in high school having an iPod and just being fascinated that I could have all this music, 180 gigs worth of music on my iPod, and I could listen to whatever the hell I wanted whenever I wanted. And it wasn't streaming, it was files that I added to it, and it was mine. Nobody could take it away from me. I had the files on my computer too. Whereas now it's like, well, if you only stream, you can only watch what's there. I mean, even renting stuff, if you want to pay like on Vudu for renting something, they don't have everything. They certainly don't have as wide a selection of horror as places like Arrow and Vinegar Syndrome and Synapse and Scream Factory will have for you. So, I mean, for me, I just don't like the idea of it because I feel like it's just limiting. I mean, we've talked about this too because you talk about how it's, concerning the idea that these films will just be forgotten, if they're not like preserved in any way. And that's horrible. I mean, there's a lot of movies that I've discovered because of these companies I just named, that I had never really heard of before. And I certainly, even if I was, like, because I know a lot of people, like, this is one thing that irritated me this week, is everybody keeps talking about Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, the Mark Patton documentary. And everybody's just like, oh, it was so good. I just so good. It's like, it's been on DVD since December, November. Like, and it was $10. Like, I mean, come on. Like, it's been out there. And I just don't understand, like, why it always, like, the same thing happened with Bliss. And I've talked about this with my friend Nasser, is that movie was so good to me. I loved it. And I told him, I was like, I don't hear anybody really talking about this that much. Like some people do. But I guarantee you, it's going to come onto Shudder at some point, and then everybody's going to start talking about it, and that's fine. Like, I recommended it. I said people should check it out, and I got a few of my friends to do that, and I was happy they enjoyed it too. But I don't know. Like, I mean, that's something that's always kind of gotten on my nerves, though, is because no, it's like nobody will take it serious when you try to recommend them something, but then if it's for free or something, they'll start to pay attention to it. I don't know, like. I just don't like anything that's streaming. There's nothing I can say that's positive about it. I mean, sure, it's a way for people to discover movies, and if they don't, like, my friend Colton, for instance, he doesn't have money. He's a kid, so of course that's his way to watch the movie. So I guess there's that. I don't want to neglect that by any means, but I would, when I was Colton's age, I just rented movies from Blockbuster. I mean, it's not like you need to watch everything at once, anyways. You can take your time, pick something carefully like I did back then and enjoy it, watch it over and over, while you have it. I still think that's better. That's just me, though.
So I'm going to ask you the question I've asked several of the guests here when the whole physical media issue comes up. And by the way, yes, you're right. Physical media is doomed unless something big, drastic happens. Because like everything else, there's an economy involved. There's a cost to production versus return. There's a profit margin. Profit margin must overcome the first two variables.
Right.
And at the rate it's losing market and shelf space at brick and mortar, there's going to, sooner than anyone wants to think, we're going to hit a brick wall. Mm-hmm. But the question I've been asking is, given that DVD is the top performing in sales of all physical formats, if it was to allow physical media to survive longer, would you rally around and purchase exclusively that format rather than Blu-ray or 4K, specifically to keep something alive?
I already do that now. I bought Haunt on DVD, and that's how I watch it. The Mark Patton one I just brought up, DVD only. I bought the Sonata on DVD a few weeks ago. That, to be fair, that has a Blu-ray, but I just didn't know at the time. But the point is, yeah, absolutely. I would much rather support a DVD than an HD stream any day of the week. That's not even a question for me.
So I am one of those annoying people who think that there has to be a coexistence, and I'm also one of those people who understands that there won't be. Mm-hmm. And the reason is we don't have video stores anymore.
Right.
The Blockbusters are gone. The mom and pops are dead. There was a guy not far from me who decided to try and create a video store like 3 years ago. He bought all of his product on eBay dirt cheap. He put it together. He was out of business in 2 months. So the reality is, for movies I just want to rent, yes, I could go to the Red Box, and, touch the COVID screen and go home and get sick.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I really don't think that's ever going to happen. I touch screens all day long. Mm. But reality is, for a lot of things, I do stream films. But here's the difference, and here's why I think you'll agree with me. If I love it, though, it gets added to the collection as a physical buy. So it's no different for me than if I rented a movie from Blockbuster, loved it, and then bought it, or if there was a song on the radio in 1987 that I really loved, so I feel like I had to pay for the option to listen to the radio. That was being beamed out there for free, but then I'd go buy the album, or at least the single. Mm-hmm. So to me, I think that's the role streaming should play. However, people don't use it that way in general. In general, they're just consuming something and moving on to the next thing, and they never look back. Mm-hmm. So how do we overcome that?
That's the thing that I don't understand, man. It's like I said, it feels regressive. It's like, I mean, it's almost hard for me to imagine the past right now. Because, I mean, people had DVD collections. And, I remember when Disney Plus came out a few months ago, a bunch of people were tweeting they were selling their Blu-rays. And I was just like, why, though? Like, it's not like you get the special features or anything. Like, do you... But, I mean, that's not for everybody. I understand not everybody cares about special features, but I wonder, is there this misconception they have that it's always going to be there forever? That it'll never go away? I mean, what just happened with Gone with the Wind? I mean, come on. Like, I don't understand. Like, if people just... I don't know, because that died for me really quickly. Because I remember when Netflix first started, all of South Park was on there. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I can always watch South Park on here. And then I was never a streamer. But I remember, like, 5 years later... my girlfriend was streaming, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll find something to watch while she wasn't at the house. And South Park was gone. I was like, wait a minute, I know it was on here. And that's the first time I realized, like, that this stuff isn't going to always be on here. And I just don't understand, like, I mean, the same thing, like, The Office is leaving Netflix, and that's, like, a staple of, like, I think what a lot of people sign up for it for because they love that show. I just don't understand why you wouldn't want to have it available to you all the time. Like, I mean, I just don't get it, honestly. And as far as overcoming it, I mean, yeah, it's like they say, people aren't going to know what they have until they don't have it. You know what I mean? So that's why when I went to Walmart right now, all the copies of Gone with the Wind were gone already because everybody knows they can't have it now. So I mean, like, I don't know what it would take for people to at least coexist with it and treat it like a rental service, if anything, I mean, because, I mean, that's how it is for me. That's how it was for me back then, I'd rent a movie and I liked it, and then I bought the VHS tape or the DVD, whatever, like, so, I don't know, I have to just assume here that people think it's not going anywhere. That's just the only thing I can think of right now.
Well, I think that there's an assumption that where we are today, we will always be. And history proves that wrong pretty quickly. But I think platforms change. And Netflix is the model today. And then there's everything that's borrowed Netflix's, their formula. But down the road, everything could change massively in a heartbeat. And that could come because simply the hardware changes. What we think of as, a smart TV today may not be even remotely like one in 10 years. And at that point, you might be buying all your collection again on whatever new format. And that's been true of physical media as well, but you didn't have to give up the old tape or the old disc. I just did a series about all the video formats that have come and gone. And
yeah, I love that
the one thing I didn't say during that video is that the people who bought any of these formats were morons. In fact, at the beginning of the segment, I actually said, I wish my parents had chosen beta over VHS. Because there's something about formats and about physical releases and the kind of democracy of the marketplace, whereas 6 things come out and 1 survives. I love that. And I don't think there's a right side to be on. I think it's just being part of that exploration. I loved Laserdisc. I think it was a great format. My Laserdisc player is attached to my television downstairs. And the television does a pretty good job of upscaling it as much as it can. I'm not going to stop watching certain films on Laserdisc because they don't exist on another format. And I think that's a value that you can't get if a digital format dies tomorrow. You're not going to have access to it the way you used to, because the platform will be gone. So that's when you talk about the lost films. What I really fear is that the films that are not commercially viable for whatever the next generation platform are going to just disappear. And I think that's terrifying. It should terrify everyone who loves genre films.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jacob McCullough asks, are there any horror directors you think never fell off in terms of quality? For me, it's Stuart Gordon. I'm sure I'll get pushback on that, but I think he did great stuff all the way to the end.
Well, I don't have the best answer for this question because even like when I want to say like Stanley Kubrick, all of the movies I've ever seen of his I love, but I haven't seen Eyes Wide Shut, and I've heard mixed things about that. So I can't really say if he's fell off with that one. But everything I've seen from him is world class, and he's my favorite director.
I will say I did not enjoy Stuck, so that would be my one Stuart Gordon hiccup. And to be honest with you, I'm not the biggest Reanimator fan. I prefer From Beyond, and I even prefer Dagon more because, as the Lovecraft fan in me, that's the one that's closest to a Lovecraft story, although it's mistitled because it should be The Shadow over Innsmouth. But I think that what happens to a lot of directors is they go through this studio machine, and unless they're fortunate enough to become a Spielberg, they get chewed up. Changing tastes and different heads of studios, you start burning bridges by not even knowing it, and you find yourself with too small of budgets to do what you really want to do, so you make a lot of concessions. And like anyone who's working under the gun, you produce stuff that's not as good as what came before. So I don't think anyone would argue that Ghosts of Mars is as good as Halloween.
No, I have not seen Ghost of Mars, so I can't say, and I certainly won't disregard it without having seen it. But I mean, I can definitely say there's John Carpenter movies that I feel a lot lesser about than others. So he's not one I would say has never had missteps.
But I don't hold that to the artist. That's the difference. I don't think that they set out and say, this I'm just going to phone this one in. It's like anyone at your job. There's days you go in and you're really passionate about. Maybe you're working with a coworker who brings out the best in you, and you have a great day at work. A 8-hour shift feels like an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. Other days you walk in, and everyone around you is just annoying the hell out of you, and it's you're not productive. We shouldn't assume that directors are different. Just because they're artists doesn't mean that they don't have to work. They're working. And I think the situations get harder for older directors and guys who have never really recaptured the financial success of some of the early pictures. I'd say David Cronenberg is your guy if you want an answer to your question. I think that he has nothing in his catalog that is less than completely admirable. But, there's ebbs and valleys too. I know Existence has its fans, and I like the film, but it's not Scanners of the Brood by a long shot to me, or Videodrome. So, I think we should avoid that conversation. But now, the more important conversation, I did a video series on this, is let's stop talking about these guys who've gotten screwed over by the industry and talk about the young guys coming up now who are making their bones and making the difference and making films that are going to inspire the next generation. Lucio Fulci was thought of as a hack during most of his life. And today he's considered a near god in the horror genre. Mm-hmm. Well, there's guys making movies right now, people like Ivan Zaccone or like Albert Metzi, who I believe in 20 years are going to be looked back and people are going to be just like punk rock shows. Oh, I saw them on their first tour. No, you didn't, because you should have spoken up then. Right. So I think the conversation should turn away from your Stuart Gordons and your John Carpenters and your Sean Cunninghams, and let's start talking about these new guys who are really doing something.
I agree.
I'm so much more long-winded than you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that I try to not ramble too much or lose my flow. I mean, I know the directors that I'm going to name in this instance probably have much more acclaim than the ones that you named. But I mean, for me, like I've loved everything I've seen so far from Joe Begos and of course Ari Aster, and I do think that Ari Aster's films are going to age very, very, very well over the coming years.
Agreed. Basically, the A24 guys are all.
I love it, yeah.
All cylinders all the time.
I just love how you've talked about this before, I'm sure, but I just feel like they just let somebody be an artist with their movies. They're not limiting them, and they're just going with these. I mean, everything. I love it. I love The Witch so much. Of course, that's another one. Robert Eggers. I mean, I think he's definitely highly acclaimed in a lot of ways, but I can't wait for whatever he does next. He's blown me away both movies of his I've seen.
I'm going to put a comment on screen I'd like you to read out loud.
All right. Let's talk about Eli Roth and Rob Zombie, damn it. I love both of them. I do. I love... Cabin Fever is probably in my top 5 horror comedies. I love it so much. It's, you know, one thing I love about that movie is it captures a time that I dearly miss, which was just like 15 years ago when people were not hypersensitive about things. I miss that so much. And I mean, I love everything Rob Zombie has done. And I've talked to Christian about this today. I love Rob Zombie's movies. I don't find them to be guilty pleasures. I don't think that they're bad movies. I think that maybe you could call them an acquired taste in the sense, like, one thing I don't understand that people criticize about his movies is they talk about it being vulgar. It's like, this is a horror movie. Like, what do you mean it's vulgar? It's a horror movie. I mean, some people talk about, I don't like the, you know, hillbilly aspect of it. I mean, I'm from, you know, the South, so I mean, that's not weird to me. I have, you know, half of my family is those kind of people, so I mean, I'm used to it, and I find a lot of charm and humor in it, and I just love the relentlessness of his movies. I love how much he's a horror fan, and whether or not those movies are highbrow or not, it doesn't make me enjoy them any less. I love them all. Every single one of them. Every single one. Especially Lords of Salem.
So, Christian is claiming that I'm ignoring him. So, despite the fact that I started an entire segment by talking about him. So,
Yeah.
Diabolic DVD stole the puzzle pieces. So, what I'd say is, my man, I think that you should call up Jesse Nelson and have a discussion with him. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you.
I would love you to do that, Christian. Do a follow-up video. I think that our good buddy Paul would appreciate that, and it may even entice him to get on the Firefly Family podcast. So please call Jesse up, Christian, and let's do this. Let's get him on the show and talk about it. That'd be great.
So, Piz says, Al, I don't know anyone by that name. I used to, but he's dead to me now. So, here's the thing. Piz loves to come onto my streams and talk about how I'm not a real horror fan. And I'm fine with that. I go to sleep at night knowing I'm a guy who didn't vote for Trump or Hillary. I'm a guy who goes to sleep at night knowing that, you know, I don't have to go out there and try and defend Friday the 13th Part 5. I'm a guy who can rest just with firm that my opinion is my opinion, that I respect other people's opinions, and I don't have to throw petty insults. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, I'm me. So what are you, Piz? What are you really? So, I wanted to talk about music with you.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do that.
And the big thing here is that we've had these private conversations, mostly as Twitter messages back and forth. And not long ago, I reached out to you, like just out of the blue. I'm sure you were like, "What the hell's going on with this?" But just talk about my love for Bobby Gentry.
Oh yeah, Bobby Gentry is a gem.
Absolutely, and relevant to the horror genre.
Sure.
She really, although technically was always marketed as country, she was a singer-songwriter. I mean, that's really what she was, and she even had jazz influence in a lot of those later records.
Absolutely.
But my point is that no one would expect that, I think, of you or I. I think they look at our videos and they assume, there's going to be a bunch of punk rock and classic rock. And so why is it that, just like you loving Rob Zombie and disliking people's charges of vulgarism, why is it that there's like a stamp that people expect people to just fall nicely into if you like dark stuff or if you like unusual music or whatever? What is that about?
I don't know. Maybe it's just what makes sense to them, or what kind of experience they've had in life, I guess. Kind of boxing things in or trying to classify something. I mean, that's one thing I've always disliked when it comes to music, is trying to genreize everything and put everything into a subcategory. Because I feel like it kind of strips away somebody's, own, unique take on something. I mean, because you can you can label it all you want, but it's an artist is an artist, and I mean, I'm not going to sit here either and defend, people who maybe don't really have much of a direction, because I don't believe that everything is necessarily art. There's things that I think are just kind of half-assed, haphazardly done, and I couldn't really. I think I can tell the difference between somebody who's actually trying and somebody who's just doing a half-assed job essentially. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just that people try to make sense of things for their own kind of bubble they live in.
So what are you listening to these days?
What am I listening to these days? Well, I'm certainly not listening to anything modern, and I don't mean modern music, but like I'm not listening to what's necessarily new. A lot of stuff I listen to is stuff I've loved for years as it is. One of the biggest things rotating in my playlist, of course, is the music of Mark Kozlek, which everybody has heard me talk about, endlessly, especially because I've been rebuilding my collection of his records, which I actually completed, and I'll be talking about that on the haul video this week. I'm a big fan, more than anything, of singer-songwriters. I think he's, the only reason I wouldn't call him the greatest is to give that title to Paul McCartney, but he would definitely be right beneath that, in my opinion. He's had such a very vast and eclectic career, and even now he's doing things that are very unique and unlike anything else. Something I would definitely say is more of an acquired taste these days, but we're talking, this has been going on since 1992, all the way up until the 2010s. He was releasing music that is just music I could feel comfortable telling anyone, you should listen to this, and I mean anyone. Somebody who likes metal, somebody who likes punk, somebody who likes country music, somebody who likes hip-hop music. I mean, I think that he has music for everybody if you just love music and good melody and great songwriting and lyrics. Aside from that, I'm also always listening to things of the 90s emo ilk. It's kind of my bread and butter with music. It's what my band is centered around, that particular wave of emo from the early to mid 90s. So a lot of Sunny Day Real Estate, a lot of Mineral, and Texas Is the Reason, The Promise Ring, Pedro the Lion, David Bazan's solo projects, and everything in between. That's always something I will say that I've become heavily reacquainted with the music after kind of stepping away from it for a few years. And it's been a very big delight. It certainly inspired me songwriting-wise and whatnot, too. That's the bulk of it.
So do you want to give just a plug for your Bandcamp at the moment? Because I think that... Is it Bandcamp you're on?
It's on Bandcamp, yeah. It's on all the streaming services as well. My band is called Duck Koo Kim. That's spelled DUKKOOKIM. Most of the material is acoustic, very folk singer-songwriter influenced. I definitely would appreciate anyone checking it out. It's not something I'm doing anything for monetary gain. I don't perform or anything anymore. That was years ago that I did that. I just enjoy creating music, and I'm trying to get some material recorded and new material written. But I'm very proud of the stuff that is available to listen to online. And if you want to listen to it, it's free. I'm not selling anything, so if you want to listen to it, I'd appreciate that very much.
And it is definitely worth the listen. Definitely.
Thanks a lot, man. It means a lot.
So your hands have become kind of their own starring role in all of your record haul videos, and the series you're going through now, where you're going through your entire collection, which I frankly, I think that's a mind-blowing project.
It's definitely a heavy-handed project I've been working on. It's really stressing me out.
Well, I'm gonna try and do my 30s horror collection, and it's so intimidating. Hell, I can't even get that Children of the Corn entire franchise video completed because I get gun shy about that stuff. But so. On your hands, you have tattoos on your fingers.
Yeah, I do.
So right, tell us a story.
Here, sorry. Let's see. Okay, so it says love, and then it says sick. So this is a play on a few different things. It's not just one statement. Okay, so Lovesick, a wonderful song from Bob Dylan, one of his modern classics. I love Bob Dylan. He's up there for me in like my top five. I've seen him twice. So that was the first kind of step. Is when I thought, what do I want to write on my hands? Because people, when they put tattoos on their knuckles, it's usually awful. Like it's like love, hate, or fuck shit. It's like really trashy. So I wanted to have something that had some sort of meaning to me. So first and foremost, Lovesick from Bob Dylan. Also the song Love by John Lennon, which another artist I hold in high regard. The song Sick by Ceremony, my favorite hardcore band. So it's a play on a variety of things. Yeah.
Not a reference to Night of the Hunter?
No, I can't say that. That would be a lie.
Okay. Hey, so before we talk about Christian Hannah horror, have you seen Night of the Hunter? And there's no, if you haven't yet.
No, I think that's the movie you said was in your intro, right? The one that you colorized. Is that what that is?
Oh, no, that's The Brood.
Oh, right. You said that too. I'm sorry, I forgot. No, I don't even know if I've heard of Night of the Hunter.
So Night of the Hunter is where the love and hate hand tattoos originated.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd be willing to bet that a lot of people who have them do not get it from that.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. But I'm sure that there was one punk rock kid who loved the movie, and that's where it spread.
Sure, I could buy that. Absolutely.
So if here's my plug for the movie, guys, because I'm always trying to get people to take on older or foreign films. It's a film about a convict who finds out that his dying cellmate, hid money in his house. So he gets out, puts on a persona of a preacher, and goes and tries to integrate into his dead cellmate's family. But here's the thing. He's a serial killer. It's a film with excruciating suspense sequences. It is amazing. Charles Waddington, his only directorial attempt ever. It's a stone cold masterpiece. It's available as a Criterion disc. I really recommend it to anyone who really wants to see the foundations of psycho cinema. It's a lot of it's there, and it's an absolutely unbelievable, chilling performance from Mitchum. You gotta see the film if you like psycho cinema. You just got to.
I'm all in, man. I will definitely get up on that. I'll see what its availability is like. If not, I'll add it to my Criterion list for the sale. I'm all up for that. Absolutely.
Right now, if you have a region-free player, there is an import from England that is significantly cheaper than the Criterion even on the sale, which is what I just took. There was a question about what you're smoking.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to blow your mind. I'm not smoking any marijuana or anything. This is just some flavor that I just picked up. I always change my flavors because I guess I haven't found the one yet. So it's something semi-sweet with menthol. That's what I'm consistently getting, is stuff with menthol, because I do like that flavor.
So it's not like schoolyard candy flavor or anything?
No. I remember the first time I ever was introduced to vaping. This is before I even started smoking. And my friends would smoke these weird flavors like Cap'n Crunch and Fruity Pebbles. I was like, that's disgusting. To me, anyways.
I've had maybe 2 puffs on a cigarette in my entire life, so It's just not for me.
It certainly isn't something I'm proud of, but I'm happy that I'm not smoking cigarettes anymore. This has replaced it fully, so I definitely feel a lot better physically after switching.
I have no room to talk. If anyone knew the amount of caffeine I take in a day, it's I can't say, well, you're being unhealthy. Yeah, well, guess what? Guess what? So, Christian Hannah Horror reached out to me today to make sure I'd be hard on you for this conversation.
Okay.
So, how did you start working with Christian? How'd you meet him?
Well, I've been a fan of Christian since probably like 2016. The first 2016 or 2017, the first video I ever found of Christian's, to my knowledge, was his video where he was comparing the two Scream Factory Halloween box sets. Because I was in this pickle where I couldn't really get my hands on the 15 disc set, and I guess I just needed someone to reassure me that the 10 disc set was going to be good enough. And he did a really good job comparing and contrasting them. And I bought the 10 disc set as a result, only later to be able to get my hands on the 15 disc set for really cheap. But it was my introduction to him. I thought he was a very enjoyable person to listen to talk, and I loved his positive energy and his passion for the movies he talked about. And his videos were always just like never boring. Basically, they're always just really entertaining, and I just always loved when he would upload. And I remember I would comment on these videos, and when I started doing a channel early on in my channel, I remember he commented on one of my videos, and he said something along the lines of like, this is really great. I'm keeping my eyes on you. And I was so excited that he was watching my videos because I'm such a big fan of his. And it took a while after that point before I actually started talking to him one-on-one. And I never would have imagined that we would have so much in common and be able to talk to each other so equally. Because like one thing I can say that is the best compliment I can give, I would say, I have done streams with a variety of different people, but I cannot stream better. I'm sorry, I'm wording that weird. What I mean to say is, streaming with Christian is so much more lax and comfortable, and I don't have to really think. We just really bounce off each other very well. We have a really good rapport, and we can talk pretty much all day. So, I mean, he's definitely one of the best friends I've ever had, and it's been a real treat knowing him.
Did he pay you to say any of that?
No, on the contrary, I support him on Patreon. He supports me too, to be fair, but I've been supporting him since before I even had a Patreon, so certainly not gaining anything here.
So I'm going to follow all that up with a specific question Christian requested or really demanded that I ask you, and that is, why are you such a bitch?
Well, I don't really even know what to say in regards to that. I could see him asking that question 100%.
I could screenshot it for you.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Yeah, Christian has a very aggressive way of joking, and there's been a variety of times where he's asked me if he's gone too far, and I said no, of course not, absolutely not. But sometimes he throws me for a loop because I just don't really know how to come back to some of those things, including this question.
Christian's a good friend, and I have definitely a lot of fun with him. But, your show with him, the Firefly Family Podcast, it's such a different experience than most of the watch-along or commentaries that you find out there. Because it feels like hanging out with friends and watching a movie, and not friends that are trying to inform you about the movie's history or it is much more laid back and much more real of an experience.
Yeah, and I can only credit that to the fact that that's what him and I are specifically doing, is we're just hanging out with each other. And then if nobody came on the show, me and Christian would still be talking to each other the whole time. And we would still talk about other things besides the movie. And I'm very much happy that we have a very consistent group of people who come and hang out with us every week. There's people we expect and that are always there. And I'm going to give a shout out to people like Big D from Big D's Entertainment Rankings and Reviews, John McCullough, of course, John from 80s Horror Fan, Heartbreaker, my good buddy Colton. These guys are here every week with us, and we're all hanging out together, essentially. And yeah, I mean, I look forward to it every time. It's been so much fun, and it's always sad the few instances when we can't because of work conflict, because Christian and I both do this show based off of our availability. I work 7 days a week. Christian works constantly, and he has a very active life outside of YouTube, whereas I really don't, aside from work. But I do work a lot, so it kind of we find this time that works for us. Like this week, we do the show every Friday at 8 Central Standard Time, but this week we're doing it on Saturday because it just works out for us schedule wise, and that's what we do it on. We do it when we're both in that position where we can just kick back and not have to worry about anything and just have a good time.
And I encourage everyone to check out both the Firefly Family Podcast and your regular show. Although this Saturday we'll be in direct competition with each other, so
Well,
I can't.
I find myself in direct competition with people often, but I'm not really competing. I'm just doing whatever I do on my channel, and it's what I would do regardless if anybody watched or not. Like I said, so we're excited, and we have some good guests too coming, so I'm excited.
Listen, if I lose out to you guys, I still win, because no, seriously, because this is about community. I say this every show, but if we do nothing else in these conversations, it should be to start looking over at that chat and recognizing the names and know that there's people out there with opinions and give them a platform to be heard, even if it is only in a chat on the side of a video. Mm-hmm. But I encourage everyone out there to start their channel and program yourself against me, guys. Do it. I would rather have more people out there speaking about what you love in the genre than to have less voices, and then people like the big websites have more voice, and they can drown us all out. And whatever they decide is what's commonly thought of as the truth. This is how we get Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4 being thought of as trash for 15 years. Because the big magazines and then the big websites just told you that's how it was. Everyone thinks that. Exactly. I'm all for that. I absolutely want more voices out there. Now, I want them to be voices that aren't afraid to be themselves. That's another big caveat. If you're just going to follow someone else and be a carbon copy, I don't want you out there.
No, exactly that. See, there are a lot of people I've found in this community that I love watching because they are themselves, like Heartbreaker. Nobody is like Heartbreaker. My buddy Alex Fair, the horror guy, he's one of the most unique people I've met too. I don't want anyone to put on a persona whenever they're doing their channel. This should just be raw. If you want to decorate it, you want to have a certain, kind of aesthetic to your channel. I respect that and I admire that, But I don't want anybody to be anybody but themselves. That's what makes me stick around. That's why I watch the people I regularly watch, is because I just enjoy them being themselves and I like them. So that's what's going to keep me going. I mean, if I need to know like a review for a movie, I'd rather hear it from somebody who has their own individual opinion and is not trying to speak for other people and say, well, when I review this movie, I got to take into consideration this, that, and this. Like, no, just tell me what you think, and I already, have my consensus if I know that we like the same kind of things, and I can kind of understand where you're coming from. I don't want anything filtered. I don't want someone to just try and put on a persona. I just want them to be themselves. That's what I stick around the channel to stick around for.
So, Chris Lake Counselor, who has joined us a little bit later than he usually does, but I appreciate you being here, sir. What do you own multiple copies of from a completist perspective?
A completist perspective? Well, in anything I collect when it comes to being a completionist, I can't say I've ever gone to the extreme instances. Like, I know people who collect variants of movies that just have a slightly different thing, like a barcode or something. I would never go to that extreme, but I love having various editions of certain things. Absolutely. The one I probably have the most of is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is my favorite horror movie. I think between the DVDs, VHS, and Blu-ray, I probably have like 9 copies, which doesn't sound that impressive, to be honest, but it is a lot for one movie. For me, I have a lot of copies of the original Evil Dead, and that has to do with, like, to understand, everything I have a different edition of is something unique to it. It's not like I just have a DVD, a Blu-ray, 4K. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I have the meatpacking edition on DVD from Pioneer, or I think it's Dark Sky, I don't know. I have there's like 2 different steel books. There's the 40th anniversary, the Black Maria. There's the Media VHS, which is my favorite one. Standard VHS. I like when I love something, I like to have variables of it, sure, like Evil Dead, all those different packagings, and that movie's been released to death though, so there's obviously a lot to collect. But same thing with Halloween '78. I have multiple copies of that. I'm not above having multiple copies of anything I love. I have. I don't know that many editions of it out there. I have a DVD and a Blu-ray of it at this point, but I'd be willing to buy as many copies of Sleepaway Camp 2 that are out there, for sure.
I discovered the hard way. I thought, because the answer everyone in the community has to give is Evil Dead and Halloween, because Anchor Bay released it a million times, and then when they lost the rights, everyone else released their variants.
Right.
But I was actually shocked when I was doing that, dead format. I actually had to not use certain examples because otherwise I was going to look completely psychotic. I own way too many copies of The Fog. Like, way too many copies of The Fog.
The one you showed was the beta, right?
That was that the beta? I have it on beta. I think it was actually the video 8 copy.
You're right, it was. I'd never even heard of that format. Well, I mean, because I know what Super 8 is, but there were formats in that video that you showed I'd never even heard of. And I thought I'd heard of quite a few.
And that's unfortunate. I mean, I don't own every format that exists. I don't own an eighth of the formats that existed at some
The
point.
one you showed that really makes me laugh, and you gave me some insight onto it, so it made more sense to me, is that DivX format.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what was the idea behind that? Just, you pay $5 just so you can watch it one time, basically? It's like renting? I mean...
So, the idea was that your DivX player had to have a phone line attached to it to work at all. So you couldn't just unplug the phone line and have a working player. But you had, when you bought a disc, you'd buy it for $4.50, which that price might vary a little bit, but every time I've bought one in the aftermarket, that's been the price tag on the unit. You'd buy the disc and you take it home, and certain discs you had 48 hours where it was open, and then after 48 hours, the disc shut down and would not play. Other ones, there was a specific number of plays, usually 2 or 3. But the idea was that it was basically a rental price, which at the time wasn't really so far. It was basically 50 cents more than you were paying at Blockbuster for a rental anyway. So you'd buy it, and you'd never have to return it. If you didn't like the movie, or if you didn't want to add it to your collection, no big deal. It was a coaster. If you did want it, then right through your machine, you could buy access to that disc forever. And you'd have a physical media. So it's sort of like the streaming world, but with a physical disc. Now, the big problem is there was still an account somewhere that gave you access to titles with a certain code, right? And if anything happened to their database, guess what was going to happen? You're going to have a lot of coasters overnight.
So, Lauren, that makes me think, the answer to the question you asked me earlier, that would be a great way for things to coexist, is if when it came to streaming, you could only watch something like 1 or 2 times. And if you wanted to continue watching it, you had to purchase it. And if you look into it, buying a movie digitally is really the same price as buying it physically. So why would you buy digital? You might as well own a physical copy of it, because guess what? It also comes with a digital copy 99% of the time. That would be the great answer, is that you're limited to how many times you can view something on the streaming platforms. I think that would be a great way to do it.
So, to give you an idea about kind of the answer to the question of, like, why wouldn't you just buy the physical disc? The IKEA catalog can give you the answer. So if you go back 20 years and look at the IKEA catalogs, which you can find online, you don't have to find it, you don't have to eBay an old catalog. There was probably no exaggeration, 7 pages of bookshelves available that you could buy, have them shipped to your local store, take them home and build them. And of course, since they never gave you all the hardware you needed, it would fall apart in a week. But that's here nor there. Today, you know how many bookshelf pages there are? 2.
2.
Now, there's probably 8 different bookshelves you can buy. But the fact is, people are not storing anything physical. Books, music, movies. They want them to exist somewhere where they can access them at all times digitally, but they don't want them to be clutter around their house because they don't see the value. They want that wall to be clean.
My buddy X-Men, Xavier, X-Men 1996, he has a great resolution for this, and this is what he does. And I think this is a little bit late 90s, 2000s of him to do this, but I admire it. He puts
Binders?
his disc. Yeah, he uses binders. That's what he does, and he says
Yeah,
the
binders
reason
for
I do
women.
it. He says the reason I do it is to save space on my shelf. I think that's a good way to go.
I think there's a million solutions to this, and I don't think there's a right or wrong. The unfortunate thing is that the popular answer is going to eliminate a lot of the answers we'd like. We're not going to be able to do what we'd like because the majority are going in a different way. So
I
that's
know,
the
and
unfortunate
I still stand by that. I think it's going to be one of those things where people aren't going to realize what they have until it's gone. And, I mean, but, then I look at things like vinyl, dude. Like, that's so insanely popular. When I started collecting vinyl, I'm not trying to sound like a hipster here, I swear. When I first started collecting vinyl, it was not the revival by a couple years. And I watched it revive. And when I kind of stepped away from it for the last few years, when I came back, I was very surprised to see that it was even bigger than when I left it. Like, it's not simmering down. I know there's a lot of reasons for that. I know that there's nostalgia, but then there's people who like the aesthetic of it and who enjoy the experience of it, who actually enjoy the sound quality of it. And people, I don't hear people complain about that, although that can be very cumbersome as far as storage. I just think people just aren't aware of what I think people just take it for granted. Honestly, that's what I think.
The big thing I always point out with vinyl, and you saw a little bit of my collection a while back, is that it was the predominant music format for 60 years. So it's cross-generational. It's how not just an entire, it's how 4 generations grew up consuming music. And then it was gone for a while, pretty hard to get a hold of. And then it started to trickle back. And I think that's different than the movie going or the movie buying experience, just because you don't have 60 years of it.
That's true. Yeah.
Of any one format. So I think that's a big part of it. But listen, there may be a day when there's a revival. Now, what format will win that revival? Who knows?
That's a good question.
It's a curious question because I don't feel personally connected to any format to be on its team. VHS was great, but let's face it, I don't actually want to watch most things on VHS.
No. All the VHS I have is just for collectability. I mean, I don't have any desire to watch it over a Blu-ray. Not even close.
Yeah, and again, same thing with Laserdisc. The films I watch on Laserdisc are either unavailable in Laserdisc or not available in that form. For instance, not a Star Wars fan at all. Okay, I like 2 movies in that franchise. I like Empire Strikes Back and Rogue One. That's it.
Okay,
that's it. That's all I
like. I'm
like.
glad you didn't say Last Jedi. That's all I care about.
Yeah, but I don't. You see, but here's the thing. This is where you lose respect for me. It felt like a Star Wars film to me. It just felt like any of the bad Star Wars films to me, which I would include Return of the Jedi in. I would include all the prequels. And I get it. Everyone's going to feel differently.
I don't stand on the idea that the Star Wars movies are amazing films. I think they are campy, and I think they are just blockbuster-esque films. I don't really look at them. I would say a movie like The Empire Strikes Back has more merit than the rest of them. But I don't hold them in that regard. I certainly don't.
I'll be. Here you go. I'll lose whatever Star Wars fans are still watching right here. I might think that Rogue One in time will be viewed as The Empire Strikes Back of the series.
It deserves to be. It's the best one by far.
It is a World War II spy film. Is what it is.
It's great.
And yeah. I mean, it has its missteps too. It's not a perfect film, but of that franchise. But here's the thing. So I like these 2 movies. Empire, obviously, you can't buy unadulterated anymore. But I have the Laserdisc. I have the 21st century's first release of the Laserdisc. Why would I watch that movie any other way?
Well, first of all, I just want to say this, and you're not going to do this anyways, but if anybody's listening, do not buy the 4K of that movie. They did a horrible job restoring it. I wouldn't recommend the special editions over everything. I have those fan edits on Blu-ray, which are the original theatrical versions, and that's the way I prefer watching them. They were my first versions of those movies. I watched those right before the special editions came out on VHS. So, I mean, you could criticize the CGI. Sure, I'm not a CGI, I mean, sure, I don't love it, but I'm saying, I don't have a strong opinion about hating or anything, but that's not the problems with those movies. I don't like how they change things about them, and they change scenes and stuff, and it's just ridiculous, man. Like I don't know. Like, I hate that it's the standard. You don't even have an option. I really don't. I really dislike that.
Yeah, absolutely. And streaming's going to make that worse, not better. By the way.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, because imagine one day that you can only watch like the theatrical version. No, this would be worse. You could only watch the director's cut of The Exorcist. That would be really awful.
I don't have that harsh of feelings about the director's cut. I just see it as unnecessary.
I don't dislike it. I don't dislike it, but the theatrical version is a much different experience from a narrative standpoint, and I think it would be sad if people don't get to experience that.
But there's the difference between William Friedkin and George Lucas. Friedkin has always made that original theatrical release available.
Exactly.
He's never forbid it from being released. Not that he has that kind of power, but he wouldn't. He's proud of the movie they released. He just has his preferred version, or maybe it was just a matter of, I want to get the spider crawl back in the film. You know?
Right, yeah. And I think that has its place. I do.
I think it's what it comes down to. I do prefer the theatrical, and that's the one I watch, but I don't. I liked going back to the theater and seeing The Exorcist on the big screen, which I had not done in my lifetime. So far be it from me to scream. You know what I find most interesting? Alien gets a re-release about every 8 years. I don't know if you've noticed this.
Constantly, yeah.
And they never screw with the movie.
No, yeah. I love that. That movie doesn't need any kind of tinkering whatsoever. There's nothing I could even remotely cite as a problem.
Yeah, it's in my
great
top
70s horror.
And here's the thing. It may be the most perfect film ever made. Because
I can't think of anything. I can't think of a single critique. This Jerry Goldsmith score, right? That's Jerry Goldsmith, right?
Yeah.
Jerry Goldsmith's score. The cinematography is out of this world. The tension is just phenomenal. All of the scenes.
The fact that you know every character's name, and you did immediately. But, Alien is... It's not my favorite film. Everyone knows The Bride of Frankenstein is my favorite film. And I think The Bride of Frankenstein is the best film ever made. But it's not the most perfect. If you watch the climax of that film, there's a character in the windmill who should not be there in one single cut of the film. During editing, happened. Before CGI, they just hope you don't notice. So there's a huge continuity error in that film. Does it hurt the film? In my opinion, no. But I can't think of anything in Alien even like that.
No, I can't either. It's
a shockingly perfect film.
It is. It's so... and that's the thing, too, right? Is like, I know that there's people who debate Alien and Aliens, and that's fine. I can see why people like Aliens, and I think it's a great movie. I don't think it holds a candle to Alien, though, personally.
So, again, I don't want to make this about aliens, but the thing about whenever you make a sequel or a remake, there's an integrity issue, right? There's not just the responsibility to make a great film that's fun and that satisfies all those emotions that people are expecting having seen the original version. There's something else as well. There is the ability to make a film that furthers the experience of the predecessor. And if you're not going to do that, there's no point to making it. Aliens decided to do something different, which is fine. But the thing that was so what did we just talk about with Alien? The fact we can't think of any flaws in the film. In ways, it's more Kubrickian than some Kubrick.
True.
Aliens is not that experience. Aliens is sloppy plotting. There's continuity mistakes in the film. There are things that used to be on the screen that they've now gone back and digitally fixed, which we get all offended with Star Wars. But Aliens, we just let it go. So my thing is, it doesn't further the experience. It does a different experience. But it never calls back and gets us that bone-chilling, really, really disturbing, how would I survive this situation fear of the original. Instead, it's an action movie.
Right.
So to me, it didn't further the experience. It just gave you kind of a Rambo in space type thing, which for a lot of people worked. And I'm not gonna tell you you're wrong, but it wasn't my alien.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah. So, what for the record, what are your favorite films?
Okay, that's a good question. My favorite movie is Rocky 1976. Uh, I don't really know how to put that into words. I mean, I think that Sylvester Stallone's character in that movie is relatable to pretty much anybody who's ever had a struggle in their life ever. So, I mean, there's that. I think the thing that's always stayed with me the most about that movie is how he truly wins in the end in what he really wanted. And I think that's important because I've never been somebody who feels that I need to accomplish certain things that are deemed as successful. I think he achieved true success. So that's my favorite movie for sure. Followed by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for sure. That's my favorite horror movie, and it's right there alongside Rocky for me. I love River's Edge very much. I think that's a fantastic movie. Crispin Glover is my favorite actor, just because of how unique he is. But I also really love Al Pacino. My favorite Al Pacino movie is Carlito's Way. I've always loved that movie, everything about it. I think he's great in that movie. Aside from that, I mean, I'd have to think for a second here because those are like the ones that always come to mind immediately. I'm kind of drawing a blank at the moment, but I'm sure something will come to me. Those are the big ones, though.
So, how often do you find yourself revisiting those movies that you just mentioned?
I can watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre anytime. I always love watching that movie. It's a fun experience for me. It always brings good vibes. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry I didn't mention this because this is important. The Lord of the Rings, which I do treat as one film because I watch them back to back every time, and I always have. I personally think that's the greatest story ever told. I think it's storytelling 101. I think everything about it is just beautiful, and just the journey is just so worth the payoff. I love those movies to death. The Lord of the Rings kind of coincides with that what I was going to say next, though, because it's the same thing with Rocky, but for a different reason, I guess. If I want to watch those movies, it has to be. I have to just like have nothing to interrupt it. I don't want to pause those movies. I want to get very immersed in those movies, so I don't watch them often because I'm just so honestly always busy. And I just cannot have those movies be paused. I have to just get in that world when I watch those movies.
Chris Lake Counselor 77 asks, as a Rocky fan, what are your thoughts on Creed 1 and 2? I have not seen either, by the way.
I think that they're good movies, but I really would have been unaffected if they weren't made. I think that Rocky Balboa was a perfect ending to that franchise. And I mean, that's not to say that I think they can't make more movies. They can do whatever they want, sure. It doesn't take away anything from me. I don't let the beginning of Halloween Resurrection ruin my perception of the end of Halloween H2O. But I think they're good, but I don't think that they hold a candle to the Rocky franchise. I love all the Rocky films. I love Rocky 5. I don't hate on it like other people, and I will say this now. I like Rocky 5 way more than I like Creed 1 or 2. Way more.
I've seen all of the proper Rocky films, but besides the first film, I'm not really a fan. And I never understood 5 being pointed out as particularly worse. I think the idea of the idea of the alley fight, I think, is really brave and really cool.
I love
you
that.
You took all the spectacle out, and it's about 2 guys.
Right.
I think it's almost too brave for Hollywood, to be honest with you.
I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand the hate on that movie. I really don't.
I think there's enough goofy stuff in that series that to be have that sticking point. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think it's that different in terms of quality of other sequels in that franchise. I don't know. I mean, I know Rocky 4 is a standout for a lot of people, and I do love it. Rocky Balboa would be my favorite after the first one.
So I love myself a good montage sequence, but you got to be careful how you're using them. I just don't feel like that. There's no way not to feel like the cheese roll over you during those montages. Compare it with your first film, how it was using him building himself up.
Oh yeah, wonderfully shot, great cinematography during those.
And you're so invested. I don't know. But I'm not really a great person to talk about Rocky, the series, because I don't classify the first film as a sports movie at all. But I think the rest of the
I
series
don't really
are
perceive it that
sports
way.
movies,
Yeah.
because I think they got a little bit lazier in their ambition. And that doesn't mean they're bad films, but they're just not. The first film is an existential drama about what it was to be, and this is not going to be politically correct entirely today, but a man in the late 70s. You know, the world
Yeah.
is moving in all these directions, and Rocky is a guy trying to figure out how he fits in all that, and he seems to be failing in every way. And how do you reverse that? And his idea is, I'll pick this one thing. This is one. He could have picked anything. It could have been the perfect grocery trip. You know, wouldn't have been as exciting as a movie, but it could have been. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really brave film, and I know that people know this, but I never want to stop repeating it. Stallone shouldn't have been nominated for anything on that film except the writing, because you know what, that is an exceptional screenplay,
Yeah.
and that, forget about his acting career. I would have preferred that man to write for his career, because if that was the quality he was capable of, we missed out. We really did.
Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah. I love whenever he puts a lot of passion into the stuff he does. I mean, my favorite Rambo movie is actually the fourth one. I love that movie.
Yep.
I know that the first one is a classic, but the fourth one is just like, it's everything I could want out of a Rambo movie. It's so unrelenting and real, and
Grim.
his character is, yeah, it's grim. His character is just consistent, the whole time. I mean, he is Rambo like that. I love it. It's my favorite one.
So if you buy that, Rambo is supposed to be America in the films, that he's an embodiment of the country. The fourth film really is the strongest indictment about the best and worst about America, and I think that's kind of amazing. I always say it's a better adaptation of Hearts of Darkness than Apocalypse Now, and that's one of the best films ever made. So, Rambo, the fourth film, is, to my mind, not just the best in the series. It's probably one of the best quote unquote action films ever made.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, it's excellent. So well done.
So Les Cunningham says, First Blood, the book, is better. Yeah, of course, the whole thing about that is that Morrell didn't think of himself as writing a commercial book to be made into a big popular movie. The book is really a psychological portrait of a damaged America, and it's pretty pure. It's pretty pure stuff. People always talk about the cut scene of, John Rambo threatening to commit suicide. Well, the book goes a lot further, and the book is a lot bleaker in that regard, and that was the point. So, Jamie asks, does anyone remember the movie Nighthawks with Stallone? I really like that movie. I love that movie because it spent so much of that film was rehashed in Terror in the Isles, which is one of my favorite childhood memories of any film.
I haven't seen it. I know Christian will probably lambast me for that because he's seen like every Stallone movie, but I have not seen that one.
Oh yeah, no, it's great, and it definitely would fit into the conversation. It's as much a genre film as anything Stone really has ever done, because ICU doesn't really count. That film has some issues. So I was at the Walmart today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. I was wearing my mask, which was, and walking around, and people are trying to keep. It used to be they would be 10 feet away from me, and now they're like 3 feet. So the guidelines are very much in flux. But I'm in their video department, and they have the new layout that's coming to everywhere nationwide, and it's much, much, much smaller than it used to be. But what I find interesting is that a lot of the distributors are now packaging specifically for Walmart, because it's one of the last places where people can go and buy movies. You can't buy them at Best Buy anymore, kids. If it's not a new release, it doesn't have a home, right?
Right.
So because Walmart is one of the last places, they're trying to put more value into what is out there. And I was really blown away that there is a 3-disc set of the Hannibal cycle, the real Hannibal cycle, Manhunter, Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, for $9 on Blu-ray.
Wow. I'm pretty sure I've seen that set before. And that, yeah, I know what you're saying, though. They do have some catalog stuff, and I appreciate that very much. Just seeing it.
I'm happy to see it, and I'm really grateful. But that anything I'm missing out of my catalog, I can kind of like fill in the gaps cheaply. And I'm
Yeah.
also kind of scared because at the point where Silence of the Lambs can't get its own $10, I'm a little bit frightened.
Yeah, I know what you mean about that. I mean, and the thing is that Silence of the Lambs has a much better Blu-ray with Criterion. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it is miles above the standard Blu-ray. They did an excellent job restoring that movie. It's probably the best Blu-ray I own as far as presentation and picture quality.
I still only own Silence of the Lambs on Laserdisc, and I could describe why, but it does. I really love the film and I respect it,
Hmm.
but in many ways of that proper trilogy, it's my least favorite.
I can understand that. I love all three of those movies, and I can understand that. Yeah.
I think Hannibal is the brave, kind of fearless, strange movie that was never going to be a crowd pleaser, but obviously I'm always drawn to that stuff. And Manhunter is it's the best Michael Mann film. It just is. It's so awesome to see all that 80s excess dumped into this gritty crime story. It just works for me.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Red Dragon remake, I loathed every moment of because I was like, everything this film's trying to do was already done better.
I do enjoy both, but I enjoy Manhunter to a much higher degree. But I'll go into more detail about that because we're going to do that on the show in the next week or two. We're going to do a double feature, actually. We're going to do Manhunter and then Red Dragon.
Yeah, my ginger slices almost hit the floor. Can tell I don't sleep enough. So Christian says that I'm going to bash Silence of the Lambs. That's not true, sir. I will bash Red Dragon. I will bash that Hannibal Rising movie.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh God! I mean, I read that novel too, and I was like, "Oh,
Is it still Thomas Harris on that one?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah." But no.
Oh my goodness.
But no, I won't bash Silence of the Lambs. My thing with Silence of the Lambs is pretty simple. It's really, really. Jonathan Demme is a great filmmaker, and he made a great film. But it's not a dangerous film the way the other two are to me.
Yeah, I can respect that.
I completely kind of trust Demme, whereas Ridley Scott really went to places you wouldn't expect Ridley Scott of that period to go. Gladiator, Ridley Scott did that dinner scene. It's kind of amazing. And Michael Mann was just such a loose cannon. He was just all over the place. Listen, Christian is in a mood tonight.
Oh
Why do
my
you not
goodness.
like Red Dragon? They just say in the same movie with the scenes are identical. They're not identical though, and it has the lame ending. Listen, the ending in the book works for the book. It doesn't work for a film. And Mann recognized that and said, "Inagata Davida, here we go, bam," and created something on the fly that works perfectly for the film he made. But I'm sorry, it's just the book's ending wouldn't work, and if you watch Red Dragon the movie, it doesn't work. It's not satisfying. I mean, it makes Will Graham into basically a child abuser. It's kind of, I don't know. It's not my thing. Not my thing. But I'm glad you're that passionate about it, sir. Maybe you have too much caffeine tonight. And Steak Sauce says language buster. All right. Well, I think we're about wrapping up. If anyone has any very final questions, please get them in. Otherwise, I want to definitely thank Andrew for coming on. And Andrew, do me a favor.
Mm-hmm.
Can you ask me what's coming up on the show on Saturday?
Yeah, what's coming up on the show on Saturday?
So yes, on Saturday I will be joined by Mary San Giovanni, author of The Hollower and Thrall, among a number of groundbreaking modern horror novels. It'll continue my series on the literary side of horror. I think that for those of you who are familiar with her, it's going to be an absolute joy to actually see her explain her work and talk about what drives her in the genre, because she is very passionate about it. For those who are not familiar with it, we're going to fix that. And I think it'll be a really courageous, really fun conversation to join. Steak Sauce did have another question for you. Why is it that you trust you can disregard kayfabe? And why do you do it in such a cavalier manner?
Yeah, I don't understand that question. I'm sorry, Steak Sauce.
I didn't even understand the language of that question. So.
I understand the language to a degree, but I don't understand what exactly he's asking, unfortunately.
Captain Halloween asks, when you marathon Lord of the Rings, is it the theatrical versions or the extended cuts?
Always the extended cut. Same thing with the Hobbit trilogy. 12 hours every time.
Christian says, Lauren, talk about the movie Primal Fear. That's a good one. No. Crystal Lake Counselor 77 says, Andrew, is there a film you love that you could say a prequel would enhance instead of diminishing, as it usually happens?
I'm actually not in the camp of thinking that prequels are diminishing the way most people kind of say that. I always enjoy some context and backstory. Yeah, I can agree that some of them kind of could be perceived as diminishing, but I mean, at the same time, it's not like it ruins the movie for me and what my original perspective might have been. But if there's a movie I would like to see a prequel to, I can't say I have a good answer off the top of my head, but I'm always open to them. Always.
I'm always open to new projects and not looking backwards from our reboots, recycles, more late in the day sequels. That kind of. My passion will always be for fresh projects. Lost Cunningham says, Mary! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! That is right, sir. So we have at least one who is burning the midnight fuel over this, and they should.
Christian and Steak Sauce are giving some context to that question, and the answer for this is really simple. I have never, ever, 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 ever said that my name is Devon Graham. I've never done it. I actually assumed when I created the username on whatever social media that I used that people knew where it was from. But that really became evident that that's not the case. People don't know that it's a Halloween reference off the top, That's fine,
Who calls you Devon Graham all the
there
time?
Are a few people. There are a few people who call me Devon Graham.
You would think a real horror fan would know Halloween backwards and forwards. I always got the reference, by the way.
Yeah, it's weird because, there are people who just continuously call me it. I have corrected them. My friend Nasser called me Devon up until maybe less than a year ago, and I always told him, I was like, dude, my name is not Devon. Why do you keep? It's never been a secret. My first video on YouTube, I say, hello everybody, Drew here. I've never pretended to be Devon Graham. It's a reference to Halloween. That's all it's ever been.
It's funny because you have that problem. I just have problems that they just don't know my name. They just pronounce it however they'd like.
Oh yeah, I know
you're
that.
You're not saving yourself any. Andrew, could Tommy Gunn have defeated Adonis both in their prime?
Well, I'm not that good at scaling that kind of thing, so I would just be pulling that answer out of my ass. But I would like to think he would give him a good run for his money. Absolutely. Tommy Gunn's good. It's great.
So, where can everyone continue to follow you, and how can they subscribe to your channel?
Well, you're not going to find another Hey Isn't That Devon Graham, that's for sure. So if you look that up on YouTube, you'll find me pretty easily. On any other social media, my what the hell do they call it? My username, whatever, is always Do Your Thing Cuz. So if you go on Instagram, Twitter, you'll find me at Do Your Thing Cuz. And again, if you want to listen to the music that I write, which is folk 90s emo influence, that's duckkukim.bandcamp.com, or you can just look up Duck Who Kim on any streaming platform you use. That's DUKKOOKIM.
And you should do all of that, all of you. So,
thanks for the subscription, Crystal Lake Counselor 1977. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So, again, this is all about building community. This is all about building bridges and getting the most voices out there to have as many opinions, because that's how the genre remains vital. If we just stop and listen to just a few voices and that's all we care about, it becomes monolithic and boring, and the studios stop ever taking chances. If you're tired of reboots, if you're tired of sequels, if you're tired of all this regurgitation that has become this epidemic, what you need to do really is not to boycott anything and certainly not to cancel anything. What you need to do is just start making your voice heard. So please, get out there on Twitter and support that film that everyone else is bashing. Create your own YouTube channel and put videos out there giving an unpopular point of view. Your least popular point of view is your most important one. As far as I'm concerned, and for the health of the community, is definitely the rallying call that we should all be making. Thank you, Andrew, for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. I think this was a really fun time for me. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Absolutely.
We'll be back.
Thank you.
We'll be back on Saturday at 9 p.m. with Mary San Giovanni. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their weekend they're not spending with us. Have a good one.
He's a very old guy, knows a lot about horror.